ground, determined to face whatever came her way. The air was frigid, biting at Emma's exposed skin. A dense fog rolled in, swallowing the city in its eerie embrace. Streetlights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows. The silence was broken only by the rhythmic drip of water from the bus stop awning. A low rumble echoed in the distance, growing steadily louder. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. Her eyes darted around, searching for the source of the sound. The rumble morphed into a guttural growl, sending shivers racing down her spine. Then, through the swirling fog, two piercing headlights emerged. The growling engine grew louder, closer. The bus lumbered out of the fog, its destination sign a single illuminated number, 66. The bus shuddered to a halt. The doors hissed open, releasing a gust of stale, cold air. Emma hesitated, fear gnawing at her resolve. But the thought of spending the night alone at the bus stop propelled her forward. She stepped onto the bus, her eyes adjusting to the dim, flickering lights inside. The air was thick with an unnatural silence. Seated at the helm was the driver, a gaunt figure with piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through her. "Route 66, the driver rasped, his voice a low growl. "One way only." His lips stretched into an unsettling smile, revealing a set of teeth that seemed just a little too sharp, a little too long. Emma hurried down the aisle, choosing a seat near the middle. The bus's dim lighting cast long shadows, making the atmosphere even more unsettling. She clutched her bag tightly, her knuckles white with tension. She kept her gaze fixed on the back of the seat in front of her, trying to ignore the creeping sense of dread that was slowly enveloping her. The hum of the engine and the occasional creak of the bus were the only sounds breaking the silence. The bus was far from full, but the few passengers on board filled her with unease. Each one seemed to carry an air of mystery, their faces partially hidden in the shadows. The dim light flickered occasionally, adding to the eerie ambiance. Near the front, a man in a long black trench coat sat hunched over, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. He didn't move, almost as if he were a statue, adding to the unsettling feeling that gripped Emma. Behind him, a woman in a crimson dress stared straight ahead, her face covered in a porcelain mask. The mask was expressionless, yet it seemed to hide a multitude of secrets. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the woman was watching her, even though her eyes were hidden. A teenager with eyes as black as night sat alone, clutching a worn teddy bear. The bear's fur was matted and its eyes were missing, giving it a haunting appearance. The teenager's gaze was vacant, as if lost in a world far removed from the bus. Each passenger seemed lost in their own world, their silence more unnerving than any conversation. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, making Emma's heart race faster with each passing moment. Emma could feel their eyes on her, their gazes heavy with unseen intentions. It was as if they were all waiting for something that Emma couldn't quite comprehend. The weight of their stares made her skin crawl. She dared not look at them directly, fearing what she might see. Instead, she focused on the window, watching the dark cityscape pass by. The reflections in the glass seemed to move on their own, adding to the surreal and eerie atmosphere. Emma's mind raced with thoughts of what might happen next, her anxiety growing with each passing second. Section 5, An Unexpected Detour. The bus lurched forward, pulling away from the curb. Streetlights flickered and died as the bus passed, plunging the streets into darkness. Emma tried to focus on the world outside, but the fog clung to the windows, obscuring her view. She realized with a jolt that the bus had deviated from its usual route. They were no longer on familiar streets, but on a winding road leading into the outskirts of the city. The buildings thinned, replaced by dense, overgrown trees that seemed to reach out towards the bus. Emma's heart hammered in her chest. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her. This was not the way home. This was a path into the unknown, a journey into the heart of the Route 66 legend. A cold draft seeped through the bus, sending chills down Emma's spine. She wrapped her arms around herself, but it did little to dispel the growing sense of dread that had settled over her. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. Suddenly, a voice, barely audible above the low hum of the engine, whispered in her ear, "Get off, while you can." The voice was cold, raspy, and filled with an ancient sorrow. It seemed to emanate from the very air itself. Emma whirled around, her eyes searching frantically for the source of the voice. But the passengers remained unchanged, their faces locked in their eerie stillness. They hadn't spoken, they didn't need to, their silence spoke volumes. The bus screeched to a halt, throwing Emma forward against the seat in front of her. She barely had time to register the pain in her shoulder before she looked up, her breath catching in her throat. The bus driver had vanished, the driver's seat empty, as if he had never been there at all. Panic surged through her veins as she scanned the dimly lit bus. The other passengers, they were changing, their faces twisted and contorted, morphing into grotesque visages that seemed to come straight out of a nightmare. The man in the trench coat slowly raised his head, his hat falling back to reveal a face that was skeletal, eyes burning with an eerie green light. His bony fingers clutched the seat in front of him, knuckles white with tension. The woman in red let out a low, guttural growl, her porcelain mask cracking, revealing a grotesque, inhuman visage beneath. Her eyes glowed with a malevolent intensity, and her fingers elongated into sharp, claw-like appendages. The teenager, his eyes now glowing a sinister red, grinned, revealing rows of sharp, pointed teeth. He held up the teddy bear, its fur peeling away to reveal rotting flesh and bone. The sight of it made Emma's stomach churn. This was no ordinary bus ride. The air was thick with an oppressive sense of dread, and the walls seemed to close in around her. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she realized she was trapped in a nightmare come to life. She had to find a way out, but every exit seemed to be blocked by these nightmarish creatures. The bus, once a mundane mode of transportation, had become a vessel of terror, carrying her deeper into the unknown. Emma's mind raced, searching for a solution, a way to escape this living nightmare. But with each passing second, the creatures grew more menacing, their eyes fixed on her with predatory intent. She knew she had to act fast or risk becoming one of them. The bus ride from hell was far from over, and Emma's fight for survival had only just begun. This was no ordinary bus ride, this was a nightmare come to life, and Emma was right in the middle of it with no clear way out. Panic surged through Emma. She scrambled for the emergency exit, her hands shaking. The creatures, their forms now fully revealed, lunged towards her, their eyes filled with a hunger that chilled her to the bone. The emergency exit wouldn't budge. She slammed her hand against it again and again, her heart pounding in her chest. The creatures were closing in, their growls echoing through the confined space. They were close enough to touch. With a surge of adrenaline, Emma threw her entire weight against the exit. It burst open, sending her tumbling onto the asphalt. She scrambled to her feet and ran, not daring to look back. The last thing she saw was the bus, engulfed in a blinding flash of light. Emma never saw Route 66 again, but the experience left an indelible mark on her soul. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes following her every move. The whispers of the city seemed to follow her, echoing the horror she had witnessed. The legend of Route 66 continued, whispered in hushed tones by those brave enough to speak of it. Some dismissed it as a myth, a scary story told to frighten children. But Emma knew the truth. She had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had looked back. And so, the midnight bus continued its eerie journey, a phantom roaming the streets of Seattle. A chilling reminder that some roads are best left untraveled, and some legends are best left undisturbed.